In my eyes, I view that as legalized vigilantism.
Yes.
Because what is the difference of an officer from Wilmington being on vacation down in Rehoboth or Lewis, has his badge and gun on him, shoot someone and say he was operating as a cop?
Right. And I think the general perspective is this. We are under siege. We got kids who cannot come outside of their houses.
And when you put the National Guard on the street, you'll be under double siege.
But what will happen is some of the bad players will be removed.
And that's a huge issue for me.
Right.
But let me make this analogy. Let 3 black cops from the city of Wilmington go up into Centerville
Speak to it.
and shoot a young white man. Shoot and kill a young white man. And everything in this state will stop. Those laws will be reversed and will be just like Monopoly, go straight to jail.
This is Dr. Curry.
This is Kobe Owens.
J Street.
And welcome to The Source. Listen, I am very glad to be back. It has been, last week you had some of the strongest voices in our community speaking with you and sharing the news. And I shared with them that maybe I didn't need to come back, but they convinced me to come back. But I'm most grateful that this is the 4th week that J Street, after saying he was not coming back until the new year, that he's with us. So we're grateful for him being here. Today, we got a couple serious items, brothers, that we need to discuss, and then we'll continue on. But the first serious item I want to discuss is the findings in the Moses report by the Attorney General. So I'll let you all start off, and I'll ask the questions I need to ask.
You want to go first, Jay?
Well, first of all, and that's why I'm here, because I didn't want anybody to say that this report came out and J Street County Councilman was playing hide and go seek with the results of the determination made by the Attorney General. Kobe and I, along with the family, their lawyer, president of NAACP and first vice president, we did have a press conference, but the community really needs to know what's set forth in that report. Now, in my opinion, it's not worth the paper it's written on, because Kathy Jennings, Delaware Attorney General, led the investigation. Well, she did that, and she knows full well she should have recused herself. She's the former CEO for Newcastle County under this administration. She's also the former acting director of public safety. So you know there's bias when, number one, you had something to do with hiring the people. Number two, you had something to do with oversight. And obviously you're going to have some loyalty to the person who gave you that job. So the fact that she did not recuse herself and she led the investigation is troublesome at best to me. And I think it presents a major conflict that going forward with the civil litigation has to be dealt with. But separate and apart from that, I have major concerns with the determinations that were made. Number one, the report itself, and I read the report in its entirety at this point. When we had the press conference, I had only perused it. But the report is absolutely silent. And I said that at the press conference, I said there's not a scintilla of a reference to the fact that the county police were out of their jurisdiction. How can you do a report like this and leave out the fact it's intentionally silent on the fact that they were out of their jurisdiction. Second, there is an egregious violation of existing police departmental policy which says there's a prohibition against shooting at moving vehicles. You got one officer that shot 7 times, and the last shot, apparently, or next to the last shot, was the fatal shot because they shot him in the side of the head. The last shot went through the back of the windshield. And that's just outrageous in terms of the egregious violation of departmental policy, which says you can't, shooting at a moving vehicle is prohibited unless the vehicle is being used as a weapon. If you shot him in the side of the head and killed him, you obviously weren't in the process of being run over. And if you fired the last shot in the back of the windshield, that's an egregious violation. The document is silent on that, except for one portion in the recommendations where it says that he didn't fully, that there was a potential violation, words to that effect, of the shooting. And I just think it's outrageous, and I think that the county has serious problems as it relates to the civil litigation. And the last thing, the major point I want to make is it's just a slap in the face, because the Attorney General reported to us when we met that she had met with the county police first, and that the recommendations that they made in the report, the county officials gave her great pushback. They didn't want to do it. They didn't agree with it. So now if the administration comes forward and implements those policies, those recommendations are not going to be adhered to when you've got the hierarchy of your police department resisting from the door. There's no way in the world that they're going to enforce those policies.
Right.
And when you got a report that says the policy was not being adhered to in part because they weren't properly trained on it, and in fact, the last training that they had them in December, the month before the shooting, not only was the policy not mentioned, but the presenter talked against the existing policy. Now, it's a good thing that Matt Meyer is a county executive and not Jay Street, because if I was a county executive, be a whole bunch of people be fired.
Well, have that kind of pressure been put on Matt Myers to do such a...
I think this is the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was going to say this, a couple of things you said, and I just want to make sure that our viewers are getting a full perspective of what's going on here. You said it was against county code for the police department to shoot at a moving vehicle. If that is true, then what is there to debate on that? Is that true first?
Yes, it's true. It's on the website as we speak. It's set forth in no uncertain terms in this report, and it's been in existence, as the report reflects, since at least August of 2017.
Who is the Attorney General's boss?
The voters.
Right. I just want to make sure that I'm asking these questions because I think it's important that we understand a couple of things. One, she has to go. That's number one. There needs to be a cry for that because it is leaking with so much conflict. You laid the case well, Jay, and that's one of the reasons why you have been respected so highly, because you're fair. You deal with whoever is wrong. You deal with it. Even before the show today, you started dealing with me as a pastor. So that's just who you are. But if the code is that no police officer should shoot at a moving vehicle, and they did it, every police officer who shot it should be fired. Now let's go to Matt Myers, who I consider to be a friend. The reality of it is there needs to be some pressure. You said it's just beginning, so I'm going to be careful about how much I say. But there needs to be some clear-cut decision-making, and we cannot be political with this. This is a black family, and it's a smack in the face. That was your last point. This is a true smack in the face and the good old boys club, but in this case, it's a female.
Well, not only that, right? So this report, one, like Jay said, is just the beginning, right? It's not going to change anything. The family is still going forward with their civil case, and that's where we're going to win at. But we have to keep pushing for the legislative change as well, too. Mm-hmm. One of the main issues with this, going back just to the criminal side of it, and why the AG is saying she cannot criminally prosecute, is because it was such a delay in changing our use of force policy from subjective to objective, something that Jay has talked about a lot. Mm-hmm. Chapter 4, Section 64 and 67. Mm-hmm. Now, we did change that. Mm-hmm. But we changed it after the fact.
Changed it in June, and the shooting was in January.
Right. So when they're applying it to this case, they still have to use the old law. Now, there has been numerous departmental policies broken by Newcastle County. And I think the biggest that failed in this report was, again, nothing about their jurisdiction.
Right, I was going to say
They weren't
that.
allowed to be in the city at that time. No one knew they were operating within the city. It goes against the jurisdictional agreement. It goes against everything. But from what we were told is if they're in a situation like this, no matter where their jurisdiction is, as long as they're operating as officers, saying they're an officer, they have their badge and gun on them, it is legal for them to kill someone.
Now, but let me.
In my eyes, hold up. In my eyes, I view that as legalized vigilantism.
Yes.
Because what is the difference of an officer from Wilmington being on vacation down in Rehoboth or Lewis, has his badge and gun on him, shoot someone and say he was operating as a cop?
Right. Okay.
It doesn't matter. Just because Newcastle and Wilmington are so close, it shouldn't matter. If you're not a sworn-in officer of that jurisdiction and you're not legally allowed to be there at that time, you have broken the law. And that's a huge issue for me.
Right. But let me make this analogy. Let 3 black cops from the city of Wilmington go up into Centerville
Speak to it.
and shoot a young white man. Shoot and kill a young white man. And everything in this state will stop. Those laws will be reversed and will be just like Monopoly, go straight to jail. There's no way in the world that would be acceptable, but we have to accept this? I don't think so. It's just, and I raised a question in a public safety meeting as it relates to jurisdiction. I said, what is the jurisdictional agreement? I was told in no uncertain terms, there is no jurisdictional agreement. There's nothing in writing except for mutual aid. How does what transpired in Riverside on January 13th constitute any mutual aid and nobody in the city knew that they were there? And the fact of the matter is, there was one car that saw that vehicle running. There was no effort to call in the tag to see if it was stolen, call for backup. Well, somebody needs to investigate the investigators, because there's no prerequisite of what that officer was doing before he sighted that vehicle in Riverside. Something transpired, and I don't think that we'll ever know. And the other point that is critical as far as I'm concerned, the report makes clear that the officer who shot 7 times, they subpoenaed his disciplinary file. They reviewed it. They considered it. But it's not made public. But the police department, from the inception, went out of its way to bring forward and make public Mr. Moses' criminal background, which had no relevance. As the report says, none of the officers were aware of his criminal background at the time of the incident when they shot him. So why was that made public? And the report criticizes it. And the recommendations, the reason I say if I was Matt Maher, a whole lot of people be fired, the recommendations are a scathing attack on the policies and practices of the Newcastle County Police Department. Then there's one other thing that the public needs to know. Once upon a time, when Matt Myers took office, and I've talked about this, Joe Bryant, a black man, was Director of Public Safety for Newcastle County. Vaughn Bond became acting police chief, and a black man. The deputy colonel of the Wilmington Police of Newcastle County Police Department was a black man. The chief of the Wilmington Police Department was Bobby Cummins, a black man. The chief of the Dover Police Department was a black man. The old guard looked at that and said, "Oh, hell no. Okay, this ain't going to happen." And they went on a seek and destroy mission with Vaughn Bond. And in my opinion, they were happy when the decision was made to stop him from being the police chief and make him the Director of Public Safety. So I had said before Bond became the acting chief that when I first got on council, the hierarchy, the brass of the Newcastle County Police Department was lily white. And now all hell broke loose because you had this presence of leadership of people of color. Well, when I watched them come out of the state building the other day, I was waiting for Kobe and Mouse and others in the parking lot. The only person who came out of there was a person of color, was Vaughn Bond. He's the Director of Public Safety. All the cops were all white. And that's what we're dealing with now. And we're going, Bond was there, but who was pushing back with the Attorney General? See, she needs to be specific about who was pushing back. And because if those people who were pushing back are going to be the new leaders, then the recommendations that will probably be implemented and put in the policy will never be followed.
I think one of the biggest things with this report that says it very clearly is that this incident could have been avoided if the officers would have had better training and better policing tactics. And honestly, on top of all that, if they would have used some human decency, right, and treated Lamont as a human instead of being scared because of the skin color he is, you know, he may still be here today.
Absolutely.
Now, the fact is, they didn't run the tags. They didn't, you know, they thought it was a stolen car, but they didn't run the tags. But he called backup. And had enough time for backup to get there. I don't know where those other two officers were stationed originally, but they had enough time to all get there. And in that short window of time, he didn't do his part. Then it became, oh, well, we're going to perform a wellness check. It's the middle of winter. It's January 13th. It's very cold in January. Now, the car is on and running with the heat on. So how are you going to say that's unusual? Because I know a lot of people who sit in their cars in the wintertime with their heat on. He fell asleep. Guess what? They were able to turn the car ignition off and pull the key out. You can't do that if a car is in neutral park or in neutral drive or reverse.
Absolutely.
Only if it's in park. So therefore, their whole thing, oh, well, he's under the influence and a car in gear. It's not in gear. Because on video, now, they were able to review the body cam footage before they gave their reports. But on video, you see them take the key out.
Okay.
So it's huge conflicts in that for me. And again, all three of them need to be fired.
Yeah, but I'm still smelling it.
I don't agree with that because the officer who didn't fire shouldn't be fired. He shouldn't have to suffer the same way the other two suffered. He didn't fire, and that's for a reason. But he was interviewed. The officer who didn't fire, the shooting transpired on January 13th. He was interviewed on January 13th with his lawyer. The officer who shot 7 times was interviewed on January 29th and had the opportunity to see the body cam footage before he gave his statement. And so the point that the lawyer made at the press conference that you go from the 13th to the 29th and give them the opportunity to get their stories together, the whole process is flawed on its surface. And I think the county's in serious trouble as it relates to the civil litigation. This is a scathing attack on the police department, and I'm outraged.
Yeah, well, you had...
And finally,
okay,
in my opinion, the unwritten practice based on patterns, practices, and history of the Newcastle County Police Department is, if you attempt to flee in a moving vehicle, we will shoot you. This is not the first, under the watch of this administration. There are at least 2 others in the last 5 years where they have shot and killed on the basis of, shot in a moving vehicle on the basis of the vehicle was being used as a weapon, and one gentleman was from Philadelphia, so he wasn't from here. Nobody knew him. Nobody protested. I had concerns about that, and the shooting in the back of the head of the young man on Memorial Drive in August 2012, which I set out to use that to make sure that the county executive at the time did not get reelected. Mouse came to my office and I said, why are you standing here in my office? Okay, you're the president of NAACP. You need to call a press conference at the scene. And Mouse did that, and then the county executive at the time did exactly what I knew he'd do on August, on the eve of the election. He went out, and the picture on the front page of the paper was the county executive and Mouse nose to nose and toes to toes. It wasn't confrontational, but I loved the picture, and then Tom Gordon got elected. Now, Tom Gordon served 12 years as county executive, 8 years as county police chief, and there were never any shootings on his watch.
Yeah.
So how do you end up with this situation under this leadership and at least 2 others?
There's a sensitivity that Tom Gordon had.
He wasn't going to play with him.
Right, that's absolutely.
And if Tommy was the county executive, I believe those 2 of those 3 officers would have been fired the next day.
Well, and he's proven that, because he was a no-nonsense person. And I think that what happens is, when you just bring in the comparison of how, Cummings and all of the county folks who were black in top leadership of the police, you had a black mayor, and then you had Tom Gordon. And both of them were very sensitive to the fact that the community that was being served was the majority were African Americans. So I just don't know how we can get the other community to understand our plight, our issue. This whole Jennings situation is just reeking in an ism, racism, colorism, if that's the word. It's just reeking, and I don't know what to say other than it's hard days, and we don't have the representation here. The attorney for Moses, I know him personally. When I saw the video that we get ready to show everybody, I know him personally, and Iqbar has always been a very thorough brother from University of Delaware, and he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Now, I'm hoping that, he'll be able to really give them a good representation, and I hope they sue, and I hope they become trillionaires.
But there's one other point that I want to make. When Kobe was there, matter of fact, Kobe was sitting beside me when I asked the question. Now, we make it clear that no police officer has ever been arrested for shooting somebody. Mm-hmm. And I asked Kathy Jennings, to her knowledge, it's Title 11, 464, 465, and 467 that gave police in Delaware more latitude than anywhere else in the country. And I said to her, to your knowledge, have those titles ever withstood a constitutional test? And she went all around Robin Hood's barn and says, I guess you're talking about the Supreme Court. Says, no, I'm asking you, have these titles, did they ever withstand the constitutional test? The reason I asked that question, because Attorney General, with any guts, would have went on and arrested him and fought the law at the same time and said, no, I don't think that these laws, which protect the police, and adversely affect the citizens, are constitutional. Nobody's ever raised that. I'm not a lawyer. I've never held myself out to be a lawyer, but that question should have been answered because I thought that Matt Dinn, regardless of those titles, should have locked up the police officers in the McDowell case. Mm-hmm. He cited the titles because I read that thoroughly, which is why I keep repeating it. And then 6 years later, after Lamont Moses was shot and killed, the General Assembly passes and changes the legislation from subjective to objective, and as I said at the press conference, they should have been all rejected.
And here's the thing with that, and I know we got to wrap up soon. In June of 2020, 6 months before this happened to Lamont, we called for the General Assembly to change those laws, and you had them delay the process. They said, oh, we have time. This is a marathon. No, the race for civil rights justice, that's a marathon, not a sprint. Right. And we're going to win that race. But for this policing reform, for every second you wait, someone else's life is going to be impacted in a negative way, somehow, some way. And because of your inaction, this is what's going to be the result.
Wow.
I want to say one more thing.
You said that 4 times.
I'm sorry, I might be 5, but, you know, I stood there and I watched Kobe present his prepared remarks. And I sat there and I watched him in awe because of the knowledge and the presentations coming from a young man who was real special. Meant a lot to me. And I also thought to myself, when I can't do this work no more, he's still gonna be standing, and he's still gonna be fighting. And that was the only thing at that press conference that gave me a great feeling. And I thought that your remarks were outstanding, powerful, and presented in a very, very professional, eloquent manner. So I wanted to commend you for that.
Thank you. But we got another 50 years together.
Yes, and I will say, Kobe, to make sure that you clearly understand from, as we call Jay, the old head of the show, he that's a heart moment because when you've worked so hard, and for those of you who are watching us, when you've worked so hard to try to bring justice to a voiceless community, to know that the fight will continue matters. And in these days, like you said, we got another 50 years with him. But in these days, while he may be around for another 50 years, he's not going to be in the fight to the level that he was for the next 50 years. To know that there's somebody who is knowledgeable, who's not got a lot of burning, but got some learning. You know, and who
genuinely cares.
And that was my last statement. And who genuinely, because you can tell how you present yourself when we talk about these issues. That's a good thing. We have 2 things we want to cover, and we may have to come back to this Moses case because it is something that is really putting a burden on those of us who are here, because it's just justice in the state of Delaware is just not where it needs to be, especially for people of color, and it needs to get better. But I got 2 things we want to bring, and then we're going to go to our first break, and I know we're way past our time. But the first thing is that, what are y'all thoughts on this new ShopRite move to self-checkout? They feel it's going to certainly save money. It's going to be more convenient for maybe the millennials, but do you really think it will be that beneficial for our seniors and those who really shop at ShopRite?
Well, I've had complaints. I've had complaints from seniors. I've had complaints from people on behalf of seniors. And, you know, there's some people who are just not equipped to deal with that self-check-in. And then if you have produce items that have to be weighed and all that, what's the process for that? And there's also a problem with working the machine, getting the money in and out, using the card in and out, and everybody just doesn't like that. As a matter of fact, it was a long time before I would use them. But I got PO'd at the long line and said I had just a few items, and I went on and tried it. But I still prefer a cashier.
Right.
And the other is, why are you just taking people's jobs in this climate?
Yeah, and that's another thing. This is going to save them money, but I didn't want to say that first. because I didn't want people to think it's all about the jobs, but it is. It's a part of the economics here as well. But I think someone, which will probably be myself, I'm going to call, the Kinney Corporation and I'm going to ask, why can't we have something for seniors? Or for those who may not have the literacy to the level that it needs to be in order to operate, and just use that as a special 1 or 2 lines for that. I understand the self-checkout. Most of the Walmarts are almost at a self-checkout situation. But I just don't think it's fair to turn a whole supermarket, especially I was just here in the city at the ShopRite, and I saw them putting in the machines. I said, oh my God, everything is going to be self-checkout. I'm not too sure our seniors is going to be able to matriculate through.
Well, but the other is, okay, I'm checking out and I thought this cost $7.99 and it cost $11.99. How do I put it back? And what do I have to go through to take that off, not have it, those kind of things? And you've got to have people there who can assist. And what I see in other stores, you don't have a lot of people there who are willing and ready to assist. So it's problematic. But I will say, the Kinney Foundation does a lot.
They do.
To support the community. They spend a lot of money on community activities and for several years while I was executive director of Hilltop, I didn't have to worry about any of my kids in Christmas. I didn't have to worry about any of my families. And they always gave, and when they gave, they said, if you need more, come back.
And that's what I do. Thank you for saying that. I do want to make sure that we're clear. While we have, yes, the Kinney Foundation, even for Zion Fair, whenever we had turkey giveaways, whenever we have scholarship issues, I mean, not issues, but campaigns, they have always given, they've always been very generous to us, but it does not negate the fact that there's an issue here.
There's an issue.
And where I am, I believe that we can be friends and disagree. Mm-hmm. In this issue, I think they're over-aggressive, and it's creating a problem for my seniors. And it's also going to create a problem for some folks who, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, who want to steal, and it's going to cause their records to become stronger. I don't know if that's something I want to tackle, but...
Well, not only that, look, this pandemic has accelerated.
Not the temptation, but people don't always yield. Am I right, Pastor?
This pandemic has accelerated the digital age, right?
Yeah.
We could do telehealth more. We more Zoom. A lot of people aren't going back to the office spaces, and it's really pushed us further, right? But it's some things we have to realize that we as a society still aren't prepared to do fully. Right. Now, there's still people in my generation who can't even do the self-checkout, right? Have issues with it. I'm one of those people who have issues sometimes. Like Jay said, getting things, price tag one way, you ring it up a different way. Now you got to wait 5 minutes for someone to come over to help you out instead of just being able to say, hey, can you take that off real quick? That's not the right price. Or say, look, it said this back there. Can you change that price? They're taking all that away. I think, one, with this, it's okay to have self-checkout, but they should have in-person cashiers there. Right. It's been around for years, and it helps people as well, too.
And I agree with that. The last thing I want to cover in this area is COVID surge. COVID-19 surge has really taken over again. This whole Omicron variant has really hit us hard. I've been watching the governor where he has not required a mandate shutdown, which I don't think he will, because what's happening is 98% of the hospital and serious cases are those who are unvaccinated. Those who are vaccinated still have gotten it, but they have not had any real issues, which is a plea to you all to please go get vaccinated. Just before the show today, I was joking with Brother Street, and I'm going to tell you what I said, but the vaccinated and the unvaccinated is where it's all happening right now. And if you're vaccinated, you can still catch COVID, but your likelihood of being seriously ill and dying is very minimal. And I think that's the reason why they have not gone to a shutdown, because the numbers are almost at the level it was when we had no vaccinations, but they closed everything down. But now that we just having only those who are non-vaccinated, I think that's one of the reasons why they're just leaving everything open.
No, it's sad to see this spike right now because it's the holidays time.
Yeah.
For me, for the past 12 years, me and two of my closest friends, we always get together, do a holiday celebration together, just our friends, family, right? We had to cancel that this year because my one friend who's a teacher was exposed in the classroom. Two of the other teachers he worked with tested positive, so he's in quarantine. And then my other friend, his wife was exposed. She's a nurse. So it's still and they're both fully vaccinated. So hopefully, this doesn't affect them too much. But this is affecting a lot of people. The holidays plans are changing. I know they were talking about how travel plans were getting back to normal to people. People are going to be on flights again. I think it's still very dangerous to do that right now. It's a higher risk. 73% of the cases right now are this new variant. And people, the hospitals are at capacity again.
Yeah.
In D.C., they're instituting an indoor mask mandate, and you have to have a valid vaccination card to get into most restaurants down there starting on January 15th. We're heading back towards that way, and hopefully our governor and government doesn't wait until it's too late here to go back into that. And it's sad that after 2 years, we're still talking about this.
Yeah, well, we're still talking about it because we didn't reach herd immunity, and that's because people don't want to be vaccinated.
Well, the fact of the matter is all the misinformation that's been passed out, and you've got people who just won't take the vaccine. It's just outrageous. And, you've got all these people who, on the far right, because the former president didn't know how to handle it, and all his people and supporters have a different view about vaccines. And I just don't understand how you're a leader and you do things that adversely impact your people and your supporters. It's just outrageous as far as I'm concerned. And there are too many things that are open and left open, and people are getting sick. I mean, we had schools go to Zoom the other day, and I think if we're smart, we need to look at how this is moving, and I don't think it should be business as usual, but I'm just a councilman. I can't make those decisions, but I know one thing. I'm doing everything I can to stay away from people.
Yeah, well, that's me too.
Yeah.
We're going to come back, and when we come back, we're going to do something that's going to be very interesting, so let people know to stay with us. We're going to talk about the pros and the cons of the National Guard assistance during times of crises. As you've heard us talk before, Jay Street as well as Kobe Owens said, when I made that comment a couple months ago, or several weeks ago, they said they would be the first in the street to protest if that was to occur. We're going to have a discussion on that because this is very healthy to be able to hear the pros and the cons. Jay already made it clear there is no pros in bringing them, but we're going to give you some. We'll be right back.
On behalf of the family, we want to express our disappointment in the report from the Department of Justice. Fortunately, it's not surprising, Delaware in its history has never held any police officer accountable for the killing of civilians. And unfortunately, the Department of Justice has continued that same tradition of not holding police officers accountable for their actions. So we're going to have to do their job. The fight continues. We're going to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and ask for them to do an investigation. We intend to hold the county and the police officers accountable through a civil litigation, and we're going to get answers for this family.
Justice was not served. I'm beyond hurt. The emotion I cannot even give. My heart is torn, but it's still beating.
And we're back. We're going to put for the Quiet Storm segment, we're going to put the mayor's report card on pause until the new year. We'll open up fresh so that we can go through the whole city council. But we have a discussion that we want to have for the next 5 or 10 minutes, and that is to talk about the pros and cons of the National Guard's assistance. I believe that in order to bring peace to a crisis, or to bring some subtlety to a crisis, you need to be able to have the forces available to make it happen. We disagreed strongly on the merits of whatever we're going to discuss now. I just need to know your cons for bringing in. We have a very strong murder rate in the city of Wilmington. We have even you gave an example, Jay, that in Newcastle County they had to withdraw because the guns shots were so strong that the cops couldn't even stay there. What would be wrong with bringing them in to bring the peace and to bring it to a settled point?
It would just make a bad situation worse. When the National Guard was on the street, you couldn't come and go as you please. Number one, there were no black National Guardsmen on the street. And that by itself caused a whole lot of racial tension. Second, they spoke to people, they talked to people in demeaning ways, and you were really under armed siege. And you ever get one of those bayonets stuck in your face, and you're not doing anything but walking down the street, and somebody yelling and screaming at you like they're crazy, and harassing females. I mean, boys, girls, the same thing. And it's a wonder some of the National Guard's people didn't get hurt. It was just a horrific experience that I don't think we ever want to go through again. But contrary to that, you know, go back to the Hope Commission plan that has been never funded, and the need for youth intervention specialists, youth workers, and activists and advocates. We could take whatever would be spent by the state or the federal government to bring in the National Guard. We could spend that money on activists and advocates and interventionists and break this foolishness up. Because the fact of the matter is, just as much as it is a policing problem, it's also a community problem, but the community has never had the opportunity to be involved in the solution in any significant way.
Okay, I heard you clearly. I'm gonna come right to you. I heard you clearly, and one of the things I want to say is that given the fact of the level of murders that are happening in our city, while I do think that we should always be talked to appropriately, but you're going off an experience that you had, other experience that you had, as opposed to looking at the general perspective. And I think the general perspective is this: we are under siege. We got kids who cannot come outside of their houses.
And when you put the National Guard on the street, you'll be under double siege.
But what will happen is some of the bad players will be removed. And when we come from under siege, we'll be able to live.
They never removed anybody. All they did was harass people. You go look at the records, see how many people actually got locked up for anything. Then they would stop us when we were riding in the car, search the car, and talk a whole lot of smack. But in terms of solving crime, they never did that, and they won't do it.
Okay.
And it's a difference between police and National Guard. We can barely train the police we have already to deal with urban issues. National Guard aren't trained to deal with that whatsoever. They're trained to come in when there's looting and rioting and stuff like that. That's fine. But when it comes to domestic calls, when it comes to dealing with actual shootings, that's not what they're trained in. And what you're going to have, if you put them on the street, you're going to have unanticipated incidents that lead to loss of life, or it's going to lead to seriously injuring people, which is going to cause a uprising and riot on our streets here in Wilmington or anywhere. This isn't the first time, someone's talked about this. It was talked about in D.C. before. Back in the 90s, it's been talked about in Detroit before when they had a surge. And more recently, it's been talked about in Philadelphia. It's just what is going on right now versus the two different forces you want to use is only going to escalate the situation even more.
Yeah, I don't think I was talking about using the National Guard to become the police officers. I think that the operating police departments that we have in this location, this locale, is to continue. But there are some hot spots that needs to be under siege so that we can deal with the issues.
But if you deploy the police department properly, you won't have that problem.
But we're not able to do it.
Oh, we're able to do it.
We're able to do it.
We just
they
don't
just don't want to.
Well, see, the problem is the training. You talked about training.
Mm-hmm.
The training is one of the major issues with both police departments, whether it be the Newcastle County, whether it be Wilmington. And the problem is we're dealing with a lot of urban issues, and they cannot handle it. Mm-hmm. And by them not being able to handle it, how long will it take? Do we have to continue to lose the lives that we're losing because they have not been trained? When will we be able to get some control?
What will the National Guard bring to the table that will make anything different or better?
Anything? I think it. Well, I do believe that it will calm this Raven Sea. I think it will calm the Raven Sea. I think that with the presence, we talked about Frank Rizzo. He didn't bring the National Guards in. He was the National Guard. Yeah. But see, the problem is sometimes when you invoke fear in certain areas, now this is a whole new generation. Now, even when we talk about Frank Rizzo, I don't know if he would have been as successful in this type of generation. But I'm trying to find a way to deal with some of our communities where people are crying for help. Their children are dying. We are asking the city, the county for better policing, better relationship with the community. It ain't happening. Now you jump back at me and said, well, what will bringing in the National Guard do to help that? I was under the impression that maybe it will give the policing the opportunity to do the training it needs to do while still working, because we can't just dismantle the whole police department.
There's a harsh fact of the matter there, and that is it's not being successful, it's not being stopped because you've got too many people in leadership positions, you got too many people within police departments that do not care. Mm-hmm. Oh. And nobody's going out of their way. How many cold cases do we have this year alone?
Right.
And I repeatedly say, you got 39 murders and how many arrests? And there needs to be a across-the-board change from the community to policing all the way through the court system if we're going to resolve this problem. And I'm going to go back. You want to use the feds? ATF, FBI, all those entities, federal entities, U.S. Marshals, supposed to specialize in gangs, drugs, and guns. Mm-hmm. Where are they? Mm-hmm. Second, in situations where several years ago, more than that really, but it was my understanding that even when the feds were working, somehow or another when there was a sting operation in place in the city of Wilmington, before the sting operation happened, somehow or another it got compromised. And the only way it gets compromised if there are people on the inside giving information that causes it to be compromised. Mm-hmm. So we're also at a point where sometimes you need to look at investigating the investigators. Because there's more to this problem than meets the eye, and the primary beneficiaries are not the young people in the street doing the illicit activity. The primary beneficiaries are those people that we never see.
Yeah, but the problem is we don't have the we hear your voice. We hear your voice. The outcry is not where it not there. We know the issue. We know we're being treated wrong. I said on this show that we need lawyers to be able to fight and litigate some of these issues that we're dealing with. We still elect these people, or we don't vote.
Yeah, but here's the thing also, right? When you look at our budget, mm-hmm. the police department gets one of the biggest chunks mm-hmm. of money from the budget every single year. And they always ask for more money, more resources. They've gotten more money and more resources over these last 5 years, and it's only gotten worse, mm-hmm. right? So it's not, when you say things like this, everyone, oh, you're talking about defund the police. No, we're not saying that. People are saying, look, take a look at the money they have already, mm-hmm. and let's see how they can better use it. Because honestly, just continue to buy new police cars and buy, new trikes that cost $20,000 per trike so that they can go up and down steps does not help with actual solving these crimes. It doesn't help with ending this gun violence on the streets. We need to look at where that money needs to truly be going to actually address these issues. And then once we get that under control, once we get our violence rate down, then if they want new trikes and new vehicles, scooters and all that stuff, we can go that route. But those things haven't helped stop crime here in the city of Wilmington.
And I was just in public safety meeting for the county. I just voted, and I was the only one voted against it. $175,000 to put disinfectant lights in police cars. Get it! Yeah, I mean, give me a break.
Look, let me ask you a question, and we're going to go to a break. What one thing you believe the mayor or the county, well, the mayor, we talk about the city of Wilmington, should do in order to start bringing some substance to reducing violence in our city?
Fund his own HOPE plan.
Okay, fund his own HOPE plan. What do you?
Take $10 million of this American Rescue Act money and put it into crime prevention. Anyone who hasn't had a positive record so far of preventing crime, they shouldn't get a dime of that. If they need to, create new programs that are focused on looking at where it's been successful in other cities that like ours with our same demographics and bringing it here and fund it that way.
I don't know where it's been successful, and I believe in my heart that if we funded the plan that was already in place, revitalized it, that we could be the city that sets the tone and tenor for change.
And to my understanding, the mayor was the chair of that committee. Am I correct?
At one point, he was the whatever the title was of the HOPE Commission, and the governor was actively involved. But they're not talking about it, and this is not a city of Wilmington problem. They're shooting in Dover, they're shooting in Seaford.
Yeah.
It's a statewide problem.
Absolutely.
And it needs a statewide remedy, and in my opinion, it needs to involve the feds. None of the derivatives of heroin and cocaine grow in the city of Wilmington or the state of Delaware. There are no guns manufactured in the city of Wilmington, but our community and our people are devastated by it. And the other is, expanding the port was supposed to create 5,000 jobs.
Yeah.
Well, if you got nowhere to go get a job, when you're offered a job in the arena of illicit activity, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And with that, we'll be right back.
I'm getting vaccinated against COVID-19. Yes, there could be some short-term side effects from the vaccine, but they go away in a day or two. Those are signs that my body's building protection. It's worth it to avoid serious problems from COVID-19 disease.
And we're back. Now we're going to jump to the Kobe Corner, which is my favorite part of the show. What's going on, Brother Kobe?
Yeah, so first off, the General Assembly is coming back into session in January, and I wanted to talk about what some of their priorities should be.
Oh, it should be.
One should definitely be policing reform. We've been talking about it nonstop since they went out of session. They cannot afford to wait any longer to get some of this stuff passed, especially with SB 149, which is the Leah Board reform package. They need to get it passed out the Senate and then make it sure it gets through the House to get to the governor's office as soon as possible. But also on top of some of that, with some of the failures at the federal level, we're really looking for SB 1 being passed, which is the paid leave for families, for mothers, for fathers, if they need to take time off, whether it's sick or whether it's dealing with their children, make sure that there's funds there so that they can do that. We saw programs set up during the pandemic like that. It's been successful. It shows the need for it. So we have it. It's been tested. Now it's time to implement it right here in Delaware. And then some of the other stuff is, again, looking at where we are as a state when it comes to climate change and environmental justice. There's a lot of coastal issues happening, especially down in the Sussex area, that are affecting people down there and affecting clean water. all throughout the entire state. So they have some priorities going into it. You're going to see a lot of discussion going on. They had some major wins with the $15 minimum wage last year, which I think was the biggest win. And we have to keep pushing forward. And starting January 1st, the wage will go up thanks to that bill being passed last year.
Good.
Moving up to the $15 minimum wage by 2025, January 1st, 2025. Next is Biden's agenda's future. So we talked about how Manchin decided not to vote for Build Back Better. He said he couldn't. He went on Fox News. He was praised by Republicans. Corporate donors and Republican donors flooded his act blue with money because he's fighting, socialist Joe Biden. That was a huge blow to the president right there. And even Mitch McConnell has reached out to offer Manchin a spot in the Republican caucus. And here's two things I have to say about that. One, Joe Manchin controls the Democratic Party. He has set it up in a way that he wants it when it comes to the West Virginia Democratic Party. And two, he has the power right now because he's a Democrat helping the Republicans. But if he becomes one of their ranks, he's going to lose his chair.
Oh, yeah.
His committee, the Natural Resources and Energy Committee. And two, he's also just going to become just one person that Mitch McConnell is going to whip to be in shape to voting the way he wants them to vote.
Well, Donald Trump, because he could never win an election unless he's in agreement with what Donald Trump wants.
Right.
So I don't see that happening. He may become independent, but he will never become a.
And honestly, I don't think he would survive a Republican primary in West Virginia.
That's what I was really talking about.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And there's two people who are already gearing up to run against him in 2024 on the Republican side who are super conservative, who were early Trump supporters that Trump is probably going to back. But also, they had switched for a few weeks from the Build Back Better to focus on voting rights, that they were going to get it done before Christmas. Christmas was yesterday. And because of that, we still don't have voting rights. We still don't have Build Back Better. They're saying they're going to focus on it. It's going to be one of their top priorities when they come back in January. Well, we shall see.
But now Biden did admit that he's willing to do a carve-out.
Yes.
He's supporting it 100%. Where's Chris Coons on that?
Chris Coons has still not said anything on it.
Okay.
We're still waiting for him to be in line with the president on this. We're still waiting for a few more Democrats.
I disagree with being in line with the president. I think you be in line with the African-American community.
Right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. So we've seen a few of his colleagues, his Democratic colleagues, who were in the same boat as him, as they didn't want to do a carve-out. You seen Gary Peters change course. You saw August King change course. So there are senators who are now changing, saying, look, this is a real issue. We need to get this done. I now support a carve-out for the filibuster to get democracy-based policy accomplished.
Gotcha.
And then next, because we still have not gotten what we need with voting rights, Martin Luther King III, the son of Dr. King, is calling for a national day of action on MLK Day. This is not a day to celebrate, not a day to rest, because what his father fought for is still under attack right now, and we all need to be in the streets. So they are calling for a national march in D.C. They're calling for you to be fully vaccinated and wear masks during the whole time if you choose to go. If you choose not to, please amplify on TV, social media, or take action in your own home and post on social media.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank everybody for this show has been great. We got an opportunity to talk about several things, but the main thing we really wanted to make sure you got as viewing audience is to hear about the Moses case and how the injustice continues to just reek in the state of Delaware. The Attorney General, I'm just mesmerized. I'm shocked that she was a former chief of police, hired these folks, and she didn't put certain things in her report. It was like they all sat down and said, this is how we're going to write the report in order to cover ourselves. It's just sickening. But that was the main part of the show today, and we wanted to make sure that we covered it, and I appreciate that. Jay, is there anything else you would like to share before we go to our end?
We're in very difficult days and very difficult times. And those of us who really care have to continue to stay on the battlefield and fight off all these threats. And the most significant one is the threat to democracy.
Yeah.
And you know, there's no reason why a senator from this state, if nothing else,
Right.
do what has to be done, filibuster in terms of saving democracy, so that everybody's vote at least counts.
Yeah, I believe he's going to support it. Chris Coons would shock me. He would give me a heart attack. Hope you heard me. If he did not, he's just being quiet right now. Anything else from you?
Again, just, you know, enjoy this holiday season. Enjoy the new year as well, too. Please be safe. And again, this with COVID and everything, if you are seeing family, stay masked up. Make sure everyone's vaccinated and have fun.
Yes, and I'll end the show today by saying thank you very much for watching us. And I do want you to please go get vaccinated. We need you to get vaccinated so that we can get rid of this COVID. I'm tired of wearing the mask, but I will continue to wear the mask until we are in a safe zone. It has been a joy being with you today. This is Dr. Curry.
This is Kobe Owens.
J Street, see you after Valentine's Day.
See ya.
Take care.